Hey, I woke up today. I woke up and I thought that it had been about 20, 21 hours. Sometimes we sleep like cats when we've had a particularly traumatic bunch of shit to deal with. Our record, I think, is currently at like 21 hours and something minutes of sleep in one section. So I just thought that I'd done a big long cat sleep and woken up the next day, and I was awake for about half an hour, and then my phone reminder went off for therapy, and I was like, what fucking day is it? And apparently I've been asleep for like 2, 3 days. Um, I'm kind of in, I want to say, bordering on dormancy for the first bit of time. Like, my body was periodically there and not there and a little bit translucently ghostly in the headspace while I was unconscious, and that was, to be honest, I didn't notice that from my perspective. I just thought I was asleep for a really long time, and I had a lot of dreams, like really a lot of very different kinds of dreams, all kind of about the same topics. I don't really remember most of them. I remember feeling like it was all really busy, and there was a lot of different things going on. A lot of like childhood places, a lot of family, so like processing. I'm kind of getting more memories of having slightly woken up before now. It's like I remember the feeling of waking up a bit, feeling the grief slam into my chest, and being just utterly devastated and having no idea how I cope with that and how I hold that, and then just like straight collapse again. That's like, I think I remember like 2 or 3 times coming close to the surface of reality and waking up again. And I guess having reality kind of hit me and then being like just overwhelmed in my ability to cope and crashing back out. I'm really grateful to my brain though, because I think crashing out repeatedly was instead of splitting, because for so long engagements with our family of origin and seeing the same scapegoating, victim blaming fucking bullshit that we've had our whole life tends to either split us or create a lot of division between parts of us, because that's what had to happen growing up. There was, like, to be accepted by our family of origin, we had to disown parts of ourselves, and those parts of ourselves were typically persecutors and parts who would speak up on our behalf, parts that would protect us instead of going into the fawn response and accepting abuse. So it creates sort of a polarizing divide within us between those two protective measures, I guess, and whichever parts kind of function in one way or the other get divided, disconnected from each other. And since we went no contact, that's been happening less and less. Instead, what seems to happen is that we get sent into fucking shock. We leave our goddamn body and dissociate, or now apparently dormancy slash near dormancy for a few days. I've had a part of me that went dormant for 2 weeks, I think. I That's the part of me that would have been formerly called Aru. And this was upon finding out that we were a system. I think that was just too much. So it's not now. I'm really grateful for it now. But this is several integrations and then several fusions later. I kind of classify them as different in our experiences of them. I feel like I have to integrate memories, emotions, experiences, feelings between parts of me, and then at a point or slowly over time will fuse into being one cohesive person instead of like a clunky gear shift between different people or parts of parts of the same person. And it's kind of worked differently for me for different parts and in different integrations. There isn't really like a one rule of thumb way that I would describe it, but so I don't use the words interchangeably. I do think they're part of the same process, but I would consider like the part of me that would have formerly gone by the name Ari, I would consider to be fused with the part of me that would have formerly been called Kyrie, solidly enough that I can remember both sets of memories and emotions and feelings and being both people exactly the same. Like two split tracks in my mind that have come together to form one picture. So I would consider myself to be fused. And then I'd also say the same for a part formerly called Dusk, and for the parts that formerly would have gone by the Body's Dead name. So like all of those hosting parts, a caretaker part, a wolf alter, and a part of me that was 6 that would have probably gone by Violet when we originally were called that when we were about 6. I would consider all of those parts to now have integrated enough of what we hold together to be fused as one person. And then I would consider that whole person made of those formerly parts to be currently trying to fuse with the part of me that would have formerly gone by Nightshade and Starlight, who Nightshade and Starlight would have been a panther and a vampire persecutor slash sexual persecutor slash sexual protector. Oh, both, not slash. I'd consider those two parts of me to be fused. A little less solid feeling, maybe. Like one person until we encounter a piece of information that's really difficult to integrate between all the parts present because of what we hold. And then it can create like a sort of rupture effect. But it's at the minute working like I have this bunch of people that's now one whole person and host parts. And then this bunch of people, formerly a bunch of people, a couple of people, with a young part in the mix on and off. And the idea is for all of those adult, formerly host, formal, slightly animal alter, persecutor parts to all be one whole. But what happens is we encounter information about our family and we hit one of these ruptures where the parts that were host and young parts for so long and caretaking parts are the parts that learned to self-abandon protectively for acceptance and a semblance of protection, even though we didn't really get that. But what we, like the best we could get, the best that we knew of that, we'd have to reject the persecutor parts, the part that would speak up for us. So now, whenever we encounter the same sort of victim blaming, gaslighting shit from our family or from our family by proxy of another individual speaking on their behalf, like has happened recently, it is, to be fair, that's not really an assumption that they're speaking on our family's behalf at this point. They said our opinions in the no, yeah, that's fair. So because of the retriggering dynamics, it kind of creates this like shockwave within us that tries to blast those parts apart into totally separate people again in these two sort of halves. And it's been like a lifetime of that being the only thing that we could do. But obviously that's not what we want or need to do now for safety, because we're safe to be whole and to experience everything all at once that was formerly unable to be accepted and integrated and processed at the time. But it's all very new, and integrating all of these parts in the face of these triggering abusive dynamics means acting differently. So instead of having our reality be shaky and accepting the role of scapegoat and going, shit, we must be the problem, and rejecting the parts of us that are the problem, which are the parts that can see the abuse and go, nah, this is fucked, and are willing to speak up for us. Now, instead, what we have to learn to do differently is manage to hold. I try to train my hair to do the emo fringe thing, but it's really itchy and it's really annoying. It keeps falling. It's like sensory hell. We have to try and integrate both the feelings of shock and dismay and distress and grief and loss in the parts of us that were very close to our family growing up, and that were conditionally accepted by them and have a lot of really positive memories. I mean, there's some fine text, some fine print, obviously, to that, but we do have a lot of positive memories in those parts of us. And obviously, we fucking love our family and everyone who we like. This person who also was texting on behalf of our aunt and our cousin fucking deeply. So it's instead of like the parts of us that can protect us having to disconnect from the parts that hold those good memories, that love and that grief now at the betrayals that we've experienced. Normally, to be able to speak in our protection, these parts would have to remain separate, and the parts of us that could protect us would not feel the connection to the family while doing so, because that was the only way we could act, by being disconnected from that and from what it meant for our safety and for how we knew we'd be vilified. We just had to step into the role of villain and not feel the pain that that would cause the other parts of us that were conditioned to never go against our family. Now, both sides of me have to learn to do stuff really differently for it to work and for it to be healing and integrative. So what we have to do is like learn for the parts of us that were disconnected and identify as, say, persecutory parts, to be able to hold space for grief and for the memories of connection and love with our family, and therefore the grief of the betrayal and the horrendous fucking character assassination and the scapegoating, and like what that really means from people that we loved so much and who we thought understood us, instead of just seeing it as like, yeah, these people have always done it, they're assholes. I have to find space to be able to feel how it hurts for the other parts to be able to integrate with me. And these other parts, like young parts and hosting parts, have to be able to regulate our nervous system well enough to feel safe as I prioritize our needs and our protection instead of what they're used to, they, which would be totally disconnecting from our body, from our needs, from our pain, so that we can prioritize our families to be accepted in people pleasing fawn mode. So we have to kind of come together to be able to feel and prioritize everything we're feeling, which includes the connection to the family, but not the connection to the family and abandoning what we feel and our needs, but the connection to the family and the sense of fucking betrayal and loss and anger that we have every right to feel from the way that they have treated us and continue to treat us, and the way that they view us, which changes depending on whether or not we're speaking out against the abuse we've faced, and like the conditional acceptance depending on how much we prioritize what we need and our experiences, and like not lose ourselves in all of that, and not let the panic take us out of our bodies to attune to them because that's what feels safe, but instead just feel the grief from our point of view and also the anger from our point of view, and feel safe enough to both feel those things, validate them, and express them. And it's like each part of me has to be able to see reality clearly, see our memories and experiences clearly, because when this division happens, each half of me loses the other half's memories. So like we will literally become completely amnesic of either all the good memories on one side or all of the abuse on the other. And this is why we could in the past end up self-gaslighting and going into the fawn response so much, because we would lose all of the memories of the abuse. And since our family is saying you're violent and opinionated, and it's what they've always said, as a kid you internalize the message that shit, I'm the problem, it's my fault. And that's kind of naturally what kids do anyway, because it's much safer to think, oh shit, it's my fault because I can affect what I do, I can change me, than the utter abject terror of realizing that the adults that are supposed to be responsible for you are not safe. That's like not really something that you can survive when you know. So hence many reasons for why that information was withdrawn from parts of us and polarized into other parts, so that we could remain in the family and survive. And now hence why interacting with our family when the same behaviors are used creates this natural like gravitational pull to blast those parts of us apart again, and we kind of have to fight that with a shit ton of like literally second by second grounding to the body, kind of all day every day. And it's not like we manage that, it's just that's what we have to do until that becomes default, pulling ourselves back into our body, back into us, back into the room, out of flashbacks, out of our head and the inner critic drasticizing and catastrophizing, and into the emotions and sensations in the body and our reality, and then being able to connect and keep connected with all of these parts of us and everything we hold. And it's kind of just like a constant process of pulling ourselves together and back into the room out of these things. But obviously it's like you're doing this through the absolute like chaotic tornado storm that is like dissociation and trauma, derealization, depersonalization, denial, self-gaslighting. So there's like, oh, and then the pain of grief. If you're actually in the body, you've got to be able to sustain that so that you don't leave your body and go into these things as their defenses from feeling that, because ultimately that was what we couldn't process in childhood because we were not safe or supported to do so. um, so it's now what our brain learnt to avoid with all these defenses, and now we have to kind of backtrack and realize that we're safe to sustain that feeling and to stay in our body with it and to process it, and not let ourselves get ripped apart, or ripped apart from each other, from ourselves, from our reality, or from our body, so that we can just stay with all those things together to be able to process it. And was pretty much where we're at. So this is why I think I went dormant for a couple of days, because, and then kind of in and out, but unconscious in the headspace, because it was just so incredibly disorientating, and such an amount of pain from so many different sources, that having to block our cousin, who we love like a fucking sibling, and his husband, who we had really come to know and love as well. And obviously, we love our mom and our aunt. It's just right now that the parts of us that stay in, the parts of us fusing in, also fucking hate everything they've ever done to us, and the fact that they still twist it to be as if we're having problems out of nowhere. The abuse that we've suffered is fucking unacceptable. So they're dangerous to us whether or not we love them, which is why I don't bother fucking saying it. It's just at this point unfortunate that so many parts of us love them so deeply, because they have done damage for so long, and they are continuing to do it with complete disregard for our safety over their comfort. And it's just our job to detach and grieve and protect ourselves. And sometimes I think the brain can use one protection over another. So I think going near dormant was probably better than splitting and disowning these parts of myself again, because I feel more integrated. These parts feel closer together now, after waking up, and after we had an intensive therapy session today. It was really helpful, that I'm gonna talk about as well in a minute. It dysregulates me to remember how much we love our aunt and our mother, because also I'm here at the very front as the persecutor part of me that was just fucking eviscerated and exiled time after fucking time whenever I brought up discomfort or pain or abuse. So I'm like, how the fuck? But if I go, how the fuck can we love these people after everything they've done to me? That actually just rejects parts of myself. So it's like, it's very disorientating to be able to hold both, but I understand that that is what I have to do, because I'm not rejecting any parts of myself. And I don't blame those parts of myself for rejecting me when I understand that we were made to do that. I'm just fucking furious that this is what the adults around us acted like. And that they continue to blame shift instead of looking inwards at their own behaviour and questioning why we might be saying these things and what all of our experiences point towards. Instead, they just disown their part, their actions, and their roles in their behaviour in creating any of this, and place the blame on us, like how it's being framed as our fault that somebody has messaged the aunt with the concerns they had, instead of our aunt's behaviour and relationship towards them that made them feel these ways. Like, this is ultimately why we have to cut off contact because our family are not accountable, and they paint us as the villain in everything for having problems with the abusive behaviour that they continue to disown within themselves. So there's that.